Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment on the Weekend Show brought to you by Holocron Popcorn. My name is Andy Madaki. So all through January till last week, we've been talking about elections and politics in Nigeria, the motivation of Nigerians, the young people and old people who came out to vote and those who weren't able to vote. It's interesting to understand why people vote for the people who they vote for, what motivates them. Is it the society, is it their tribe, religion, ethnicity, or is it just their perception of government? And we'll be talking about that with two people who are professionals in psychology and have carried out research and focus group discussion with Nigerians to understand voting groups and their options and identities in Nigeria. And joining us, we have Sigrid Mary Moss, who is an associate professor of political psychology, a senior lecturer at Bayes University,
University of Oslo, yes.
And University of Oslo. Welcome to the Weekend Show, Sigrid.
Thank you.
Also joining us, we have Dr. Dennis Donald, who is a senior lecturer, Department of Psychology at Bayes University, Nigeria.
Thanks for inviting me.
Welcome to the Weekend Show. And I'll start with you, Sigrid. We just had our elections, the presidential and the gubernatorial elections. So it'll be, prior to this, you and your team carried out some research. Can you tell us what it was about?
Yes, thank you, Andy. We're a group of 6 researchers at Bayes University. It's a collaboration between Bayes and the University of Oslo. And we did 6 focus group interviews prior to the elections with 41 participants, a varied group of people, where we wanted to ask them about voting intentions, what are you thinking you're going to vote for, and group identities. So we asked them questions about what is it that decides who you will vote for. We talked about religion, we talked about ethnicity, and it was interesting for us to see that a lot of people were saying that for them this year was different. So they were saying, often I would vote according to religion or according to ethnicity, but quite a few of our participants, was not a representative sample, so with the meaning making of these participants, they were saying this year is different, the situation is dire in the country, naira scarcity, fuel problems, etc., insecurity, and they were now saying this year I would have wanted to vote according to religion, but right now I'm actually trying just to find the best person to get us into a better situation in Nigeria.
Okay. And Dr. Dennis, when people express their enthusiasm to vote, do you think, and especially based on your conversations, that their ethnic identities determine their choices or the perception of what the issues in society is? Do you think that plays a major role? So the ethnicity or the real life issues which they face in society?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. The current elections are peculiar to Nigeria, and from our research that we conducted, we discovered from our results that people in this present election were more interested in solving the Nigerian problem, because our problems have tended to unite us rather than our resources. Queuing for fuel, POS, as cash trap, and the issue of corruption in the country is affecting all, and the issue of insecurities too is covering everybody. It's affecting the poor, the rich, regardless of the tribe that you belong to or your political affiliation. So people are more interested in solving the Nigerian problem rather than having somebody from my ethnic group or somebody that is in my religion. So for the research, and what we discovered was that most people are more interested right now with the people who are going to solve Nigeria's problems, and rather than people who are from a particular ethnic group or religious setting. But regardless, we also found out that ethnicity, religion, plays a vital role. You can't take it out from people. It's a social construct. It's like how you were brought up and the kind of society in which you live. Because when you belong to a social identity, or you have a social identity, or you belong or identify a particular group, you tend to attach to that group. Your motivations are inclined with that group. If you look at the elections currently, you find out that a lot of young people came out to vote. Most people have attributed it to things like internet facility, more access, the issue of NSAS, people who are agitated, unemployment, joblessness, people. So this had attracted a particular sector of the Nigerian economy, that's the youth, to engage in politics. They are now more interested, there's more participation, there's more motivation towards political offices now. So for the present situation, it is more or less the Nigerian problem rather than ethnicity and religion or other social identities that might play a part in this.
I read the summary report from your focus group discussion, and I saw a section where it said not all the feedback was negative. So you also had some positive feedback. What do you think attributed to that angle to the conversation?
Positive feedback on the current situation in Nigeria,
Yes.
you mean? Yeah. So in our sample of these participants, most people were talking a lot about the difficult situation. And then there were quite a few also who did emphasize that we also have citizens are responsible, and who were calling for citizens to maybe be even more involved and take more of the responsibility in terms of awareness and being able to influence society. And some people were saying that many of the policies of the government are okay, but we have issues with implementation of these policies. So there were definitely some people emphasizing those aspects as well.
Okay, that's right. And so what were some of the results that stood out for you from this focus group discussions?
I think it was interesting that a lot of people across different age groups in our interviews were talking about the youth, as Dr. Dennis also talked about, that this time around the youth are more aware, they see an increase in being actively involved, etc. And across the age groups, people were saying that the youth feel that they're not as represented. There is a big age gap between the relevant candidates and the youth. And if I can share a quote from
Yes,
one of
please.
the participants, she said that adults keep saying, "You are the futures of tomorrow," but tomorrow is still far away, so just hold on. And she frustrated, "I have been hearing we are the future of tomorrow for so long now. When is tomorrow?"
Interesting. Dr. Dennis, do you think that voter and group identities can be taught, or is it something which is internalized as part of their socialization process?
Yes, based on the principle of psychology, any social construct can be taught. It's actually a learned behavior because we're not born with them. So for that, it is very possible. You can have this voter education for people to understand. Because if you look at the intricacies within our society, you discover that things like poverty, religion, and other things like maybe your creed, it tends to be weaponized. Poverty is important because they want people to buy votes. Okay, religion did not come up till now, until the time of the elections. Lagos, for instance, is a cosmopolitan state. All right, Abuja is. Nigeria is a multicultural society. If you look at great organizations or companies that are sort of quote-unquote Ivy League companies that are doing well, that are profitable, it is not based on somebody's religion or ethnicity that make the company or the organization thrive. It thrives because they have competent hands. Nigeria is no different. So if you look at the way things are going, it's as if poverty is being weaponized. They use poverty. If everybody was comfortable to an extent, or you have basic access to infrastructure, vote buying won't be a problem. Okay, it's coming up now because the issue of religion is being played out as if it's being weaponized. We have always had Christians and Muslims. They've always been cattle rustlers from before I was born. Why is it happening now? Why is the issue of religion and ethnicity a problem during an election period? Nobody mentioned religion, nobody mentioned ethnicity before the elections. We had fuel crisis, we have cash crunch, we have insecurity. Nobody mentioned issues of this nature. So social identity is something that is being learned and it can be taught. But if you look at the periphery of Nigeria, especially at the rural settings, these things are more pronounced. But when you come to urban centers, you find out that these things don't really matter at the end of the day. If you wanted to buy something to eat, you wouldn't ask if the person was from a particular ethnic group or a particular religion. If you needed a service, it won't matter whether that person is from a particular ethnic group or from a particular religion. So these are being played out, they're being politically weaponized. So if I might sound politically correct, I want people to understand that our behaviors are usually learned. And if these behaviors are rewarded, they would continue. So if they can afford to get exposure and people will understand in terms of election and electioneering, the intricacies and the sort of quote-unquote deception that is behind it, they can understand that these political actors are just weaponizing these particular measures. So social identity is something that it can be measured, something that can be learned, something that can be improved upon, and it's something that can be unlearned because it is a learned behavior.
Talking about, and I like that you said that because I also just delivered a paper some days ago about weaponizing illiteracy and poverty. And Sigrid, this may not be scientific, but if we separate poverty and illiteracy, then ethnicity and religion, using case studies like Europe, where we've seen young people get elected as prime minister, we've seen women elected, do you think that if the society and structure provides basic amenities which ensure that poverty and illiteracy isn't at the top of the table, do you think that it would reduce the involvement or the implication of religion and ethnicity when it comes to voting patterns and identities?
I think that's a very good question. I think that we've seen many places that it does. And I also think that it's important when discussing these identities to realize two things. The first is that many of these identities are important to us. We feel strongly for these identities, and that makes them, because they're also dynamic and changeable, it makes them a very powerful tool in the hands of media, of political leadership, etc., so that people can mobilize around these identities. And then I completely agree with the point that you're making, that this becomes more relevant around election time because people can play these identities, or at least try to play these identities. And in psychology, we often talk about political leadership as potential entrepreneurs of identity. And then you can see different political leaders then trying to use these. So I think definitely if you have religion and ethnicity on the one side, and then poverty and illiteracy on the other side, if you manage to increase the level of education, the level of literacy, and the level of awareness, political education, etc., then people are better placed to make good choices, and it is also potentially more difficult to play these identities in the same way.
Final question before I let you go. Do you think that political parties having political ideologies can shift the narrative?
Yes, I definitely do think so. And I think often we don't realize the power. Because these identities are so important to us, there are also very important mobilization tools. So I think we have to be very mindful that where political leadership and media, etc., can make narratives that see us as different from each other, they also have immense power and opportunity to bring people together and to mobilize around identities like Nigerian. Let's be Nigerian together, more than being separate ethnicities or religious positionings, etc.
I agree with you 100%, which is why even on this show we have decided for the next 2 months we will be doing a lot of conversations around orientation and uniting the country, because the media has a major role to play, and we do have some positive stories which we must amplify as opposed to just the negatives. Sigrid Marie Moss, Associate Professor, Political Psychology, and Dr. Dennis Donald, thank you for your work and what you're doing.
Thank you.
Our doors are always open. We encourage you to come back when you have research affecting people and psychology. And we also want to have future talks about psychology and how it affects people, not just in politics, but in societal behaviors, in the workplace and the like. So it's been a pleasure having you on this show. We definitely will invite you, and I'm putting you on the spot, in future, just to make sure we have more of these conversations which have scientific backing and also educated people. It's been a pleasure having you.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
So our viewers at home, that's all we can take on the lifestyle segment. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, Tenda will be on with our entrepreneur spotlight. Don't go away.